This is Art Television.
It was a nice way of starting getting a boost of really good energy before he went anywhere else. And I understand that, I noticed that. And sometimes if you don't have people able to come and listen to a really good talk, it's not intellectual, it's not just telling you what you could read in a book or you can check up on the Google somewhere. This is real stuff. And that when you can come to places like that and even meet some of your friends, that gives you a really big boost of energy, of the social energy, the community energy, the volunteer energy, which is great to live a life which has a real positive feeling inside of you. That's one of the reasons why I was delighted to be able to go to a place like Melbourne when they're just coming out of the restrictions which they had with something like COVID. And it was joyful for me. And little things which, I was fortunate enough, privileged enough to do when I was over there. And one of those was to go to this Malvern Town Hall to give a talk. And it had just, after a couple of years of being closed down because of COVID restrictions, it was the first time I was permitted to open up and had a full house when I gave a talk there. And every seat taken, 600 people or something. And also what I was delighted to be asked to do was from the management. These weren't Buddhists who were managing the Malvern Town Hall. It was a public facility for the people in that suburb of Melbourne. They asked me to please give a blessing, almost like a celebrated blessing, but also a protective blessing. Because it was the first time it had opened up in a couple of years, and people could have a place they could come to. People could have work and get some wages. And it was joyful. And so I gave the best possible talk I could give, for everybody. So just to give, because I really got off on that energy as well. And just being able to have a meeting with so many people meant that you could give them a big boost of something which was also important, not just vaccines. I've had my 3 vaccinations, nothing wrong with that. Please, if you can have some, it's wonderful, unless you've got some reason not to. But also, it made me make sure that it's not just vaccinations, it's just one's attitude towards life, that goodness, that kindness, that emotional strength, which is also really, really important in life. And that's what we have when we go to sort of a religious place, a spiritual place. Hopefully they don't just tell you all the terrible things which are going to happen to you if you don't come here next week. They tell you all the beautiful things which you're experiencing right now. Basically, karma. You're making some good karma by coming here for yourself and other people. You can feel that. I'm not just saying this. You can feel the energy, the goodness, and seeing there's more to life than sometimes you focus on in a world which is, negativity sells newspapers. Disasters are what happens, what people like to, they do like to listen to that. That's why they always just, something bad happens and you just go on there to find out exactly what the details were. Weird, but you can understand that. It just stimulates us, it excites us. But as a meditator, you want to calm things down. It's a totally different ball game. And also, as I mentioned during the meditation instructions, when you do calm yourself down, you become still, you get so much more energy and so much more depth of perception. That's why we meditate, to enjoy life more, no matter what that life happens to be. And also to see more deeply. I give so many talks in my life as a Buddhist monk, and you always want to give a talk on a different subject, just to make it interesting. So last Wednesday, this is a couple of days ago, gave a talk at Bodhinyana Monastery for the monks, and the nuns were there as well. It was nice to see them, and a lot of lay people as well. And so I gave a talk. You know the subject of the talk, what it was called? It was called Buddhism and Concrete. And I gave that talk because poor Ajahn, he was doing a concrete pour in the afternoon. He said, I'm going to be really a bit too tired to come to your talk. I said, okay, you like concrete so much, I'm going to give a talk on Buddhism and concrete. So I'll come to that. You know, why? And the final part of that talk, number one, like concrete is malleable. You can turn it into whatever shape you want it to. And concrete is strong. So whatever happens to you in the world, it doesn't sort of affect it. But the marvelous part about the concrete sort of talk was real experiences of meditation. Because there was a time when over in these monasteries of Thailand where I grew up as a monk, that's where I got my training, monsoon time was worse than probably Sydney and Queensland or whatever. It really bucketed down. But you know, we were used to that. So we do our walking meditation inside the hall. And the hall was concrete surface, no carpet, no tiles or anything. This was a poor part of northeast Thailand. And the concrete was laid by the villagers. You know, these weren't sort of experts. And I told the monks, and I was there, I saw it, a lot of that was done by spit. Please excuse me, you wouldn't be able to get away with it these days with health regulations. They had the concrete there, and that would actually give it some liquid there to be able to smooth it a bit better. But anyway, that was there. You didn't worry about it. But the thing was that when you were doing your walking meditation, that's the other type of meditation which we do, not just sitting down all day, but just doing mindful walking backwards and forwards. They came several times, but the first time I remember doing my walking meditation in this hall, and you know, the surface was rough, it had different shades of grey on it, it was, you know, high here, low there. And when you're mindful, I mean really mindful, you become super mindful, and you can actually see all the shapes in the concrete and the different colours and the contours. It wasn't just a flat piece of ordinary concrete. It got to the point, honestly, and I'm not exaggerating here, that looked like a work of art. It was so beautiful that I couldn't carry on walking. I stopped and stared for about 15 minutes in awe of this incredible artistic piece of concrete. And of course, I thought, I can't walk on this. It's like walking on a Picasso. I thought of, I'm going to get a saw, cut it out and send it to the Tate Modern Museum in London. It deserves to be admired not just by a monk, but by the whole of humanity. I wasn't going crazy, I was just becoming super mindful. And that's what happens. When you meditate a lot, you see just deeply into things. You see much more than an ordinary person sees. And that's why that some of these meditators become incredibly wise. Seeing in a deeper level beauty in places you never saw before. So, how does that deal with conflict and death and injury and kids losing their life and buildings which took such a long time to create now being reduced to rubble? And this is not just a theory, this is your relations, your friends, your loved ones. This is happening. How on earth do we relate to this? At the moment it's Ukraine. Some time ago it was Burma. And it's Vietnam. Why are always these conflicts, or North Africa? Or it goes on and on and on and on. But one of the things which I remember, not just specifically is just saying, one particular conflict. Weird to say that sometimes out of conflict there's some amazing, beautiful things happen. And it's hard for me to say this when people are worried sick about the relations, outside of Kiev. But it's another way of looking. Another way of looking at conflict. Buddhist story. I think hopefully many of you may know not just the theory of Buddhism or the teachings of the Buddha, but how that developed over the centuries and what happened to Buddhism. And there was one of the people I'm going to mention was Asoka. It's supposed to be an emperor, Asoka. He's a historic real person simply because he left these stone monuments throughout India, which surprisingly, it was almost 2,300 years ago. They are still there. You can still see them. Even the official symbol of India these days is a wheel. And I know Mahatma Gandhi wanted it to be like a spinning wheel, but it's a wheel which was on top of one of the Asoka's columns, because he was a king, an emperor, and he already had the most powerful, basically, army in India at that time, and he used that army to invade the territory of Kalinga. And now, after that time, he basically controlled most of the Indian peninsula, the Indian subcontinent, and he could quite fairly call himself an emperor. But what happened? He saw so much death and destruction, and he wrote about it. And it caused him so much sorrow and grief and regret, when you can actually see what conflict actually produces. And as a result of that, please excuse me, I'm not being a triumphalist, but just he became a Buddhist and gave up such conflict and put all these trees along the roads, places for animals to get looked after. And I think it was once a month or something, would make sure there was vegetarianism in the whole kingdom. And he changed. He saw with regret what had happened and changed his whole way of life. One of his stories, and I always remember this story, that he had a brother, and his brother was not really interested in spirituality at all. And so how do you teach someone you're very close to appreciate the finer things of life? So what Emperor Asoka did, that he arranged to go for a bath, and then he left all his royal robes and crown, scepter, I don't know what he had in that time. He left it outside the bathroom, and he arranged for his brother to walk past. And some of his brother's attendants said, "Oh, look, your brother the emperor's left all his garments outside. Why don't you try them on? Because if Emperor Asoka dies, you'll have to take over the empire. You have to be the emperor. Why didn't you just try them on?" He said, "No, I can't do that. That's illegal. That's like treason. That's like trying to take over the empire when my brother the emperor is still alive. That's a capital offence. I can't do that." "Oh, he won't know. We won't tell him." And so he put them on. If you had that, just opportunity, to wear these expensive robes, and like I remember seeing Queen Elizabeth with all her diamonds and crown, a nice robe. Would you like to try it on, just for size? But anyway, he put them on, and that was the whole plan. And then the emperor came out of the bathroom, So I said, what are you wearing my clothes for, brother? Oh, I only just tried them on. And the Emperor said, you should know that is illegal. That's an offence. I have to be fair with everybody. Just because you're my brother, I can't treat you like anybody else, like everybody. I can't treat you special. You will have to be executed. Oh, please, don't do that to me. I was only just trying them on. I'm sorry, but it's capital offence. But I'll tell you what, because you're my brother, because you'd like to be the emperor, you can actually enjoy all the benefits of being an emperor for 7 days. And after 7 days, then I'll have to carry out the sentence. You enjoy everything, the nice food, entertainment, whatever you want, for 7 days. And after 7 days, nice holiday for the Emperor Asoka, and asked his brother after 7 days, did you enjoy it? Enjoy it, said the brother. How can you enjoy anything when you know in 7 days you're going to be executed? I couldn't even sleep properly. And that's when the Emperor said, that was a whole plan from the beginning. I knew what you were going to do. It was all planned. I'm not going to execute you. You know, you're my brother. I'm a kind man now. I don't execute people. But now you know. How can you enjoy when you know you're going to die soon? And he taught him Dhamma that way. Just why are we always into sensory pleasures? In enjoying. Isn't that something more important? So little by little, the Emperor Asoka just taught his brother. But it also became every time I read about some of the stuff which Emperor Asoka did after he had regret, remorse, it seemed to be quite inspiring. Something good came out of that. And the goodness which came out of that was the most understanding peace. And it's one of the reasons why can't we continue that learning and just do away with conflict? And I'm not just talking about conflict between nations, but conflict between people. Have you had conflict with the people you live with, your relations, your loved ones? Sometimes people tell me this and they say, why are you arguing? Sometimes people come to see me, husbands and wives, and they come and say, oh, we can't stand each other. And I've known both of you for such a long time. He's a good guy, she's a good woman. Oh, but you don't know him really, Ajahn Brahm. Oh, I have to live with him. But he has to live with you as well. You're both imperfect. The strange thing is we always assume that other people are perfect. They're not. You're not perfect. We always assume that governments should be perfect. They're not, as we all know. But in my position, I've known a few prime ministers and presidents and queens and kings. It's really weird being a monk. You know, I became a monk just to go into the jungles and meditate and just be simple. But every now and again, you meet these big shots. Some of them you get inspired by. Others you think, I wouldn't like to say anything bad about him and get caught. He'll probably disappear somewhere. But it's interesting to actually just see some of the leaders of our communities. They try to do their best when they begin. But after a while they tend to get corrupted. And sometimes the corruption is because the only people allowed to advise them are just the inner circle. Well, they call it in Australia the brown noses. So close behind, they get a brown nose. But what they do, they advise the leaders in a really awful, wrong way. We get conditioned by what's taught to us, by what we see, by what we hear. We don't look deeper into it. I often think that it would be great for people to do things like retreats. Be great for people who can understand some of those great similes which I remember reading in the suttas. One of them was the simile of the king going with his army. He'd been on exercises, and then when he was going back to the palace after exercise, he saw these 2 mango trees. And those 2 mango trees, one had so many mangoes, they were ripe, and you could smell just they must be really sweet and very juicy. There's hundreds of them on there, all ready for eating. And the other tree had no mangoes on it at all. And he said, look at that stupid tree with no mangoes, doesn't give any service to anybody. What a bad tree. But this tree over here with all the mangoes, that looks really delightful. I'm going to come back here after going to the palace and getting changed and come back and eat some of those mangoes. So he went back to the palace, got changed, and went back to eat some of those mangoes on the tree with the beautiful, delicious mangoes. And found when he got back, the soldiers hadn't waited to get changed. They'd just eaten all those mangoes, left nothing for the king. Not only that, but by getting those mangoes, they destroyed so many branches and twigs, and so much leaves lay on the floor. That mango, which once was full of mangoes and very beautiful, healthy tree, now looks so badly injured. And he looked at the other tree, which had hardly anything, which hadn't been touched. And he gave up the kingship. He abdicated straight away. Because being a king, being in power, how many people look at you and just want what you have? How many people, when you're very wealthy, want what you have? It's much better being poor. It's much better being simple. Much better not having too much. Then nobody wants anything of yours. A simple story. I remember this old van we used to have, and we used to one day, I think I was going to a funeral or something, but we parked it in Newcastle Street in Northbridge so I can get some lunch. And the driver sort of, had this place over there where you get some lunch. And so we parked the car. Northbridge, for those living overseas, that's like the rough area. Well, the rough area was a bit dangerous at night time anyway, so I'm told. I've never been there at night time, so how would I know? But anyway, I think you get the picture. It's more like, because it's right to call it the red light district of Perth? Yeah, okay, people. Anyway. So he parked the car there, and we went to have lunch. And after I had lunch, before 12, he was looking for the keys to the car. He said, "Have you got the keys, Ajahn Brahm? I can't find them in my pocket." I said, "No, I haven't got them. You had them. You're the driver." And so we went back to the car. We'd been there half an hour having lunch. And when we went back there, we found the keys. They were in the ignition. The doors were open. And the engine was running all the time we were having lunch. And no one stole the car. You know why? Because it was an old battered car. They're the very best. No one wants to steal those. But anyway, there was that particular king sort of abdicated and lived a nice peaceful life, as a monk afterwards. And it's also the same. I do recall going to Vietnam at one of these conferences, and if you ever go to the conferences, sometimes you have some interesting experiences, but also you just have some really powerful experiences. And that was, this was a conference in Hanoi, and this was also where they took us to Ha Long Bay, And on the way back, there was this mountain, and it became very famous because there was a king of Vietnam, in that northern part of Vietnam, centuries ago, who decided to abdicate too. And he actually climbed up this mountain, it's a long way to the top, and actually that was where he became a monk and lived his life. And it was very, very austere up there, and just it was inspiring that people with everything and so much power could actually give up their power, because they realized you don't really have power if you control things. Because after a while, you find you cannot control. That's one of the things which I noticed, in a place like Ukraine, or any place. After a while, you lose control. This is one of the sayings of the Buddha: the victorious never get a good night's sleep. Those who are defeated always they harbour that revenge. But those who are peaceful are the ones who sleep easy. There is no victory, because you create so much ill will with those people that after a while you find you can't control them. That's one of the things you can see this happening now in a place like Ukraine, that invading forces will never control that country. They can't. Because control and power is what other people give you voluntarily. You can't make them. And that's one of the reasons why eventually you'd have to give in. You'd have to sort of leave. With any conflict, you find this just, first of all, you have to make some sort of peace. And peace is a gift. It's a gift you give for others. And it costs. It costs a lot. But nevertheless, it's worth the cost to have peace. And to have some way where there can be a healing. I always find, in the Vietnam War, there's terrible things happened there. I remember just even before I became a monk, I was hanging out in the temple in London, and many people were coming there. I remember this Cambodian family coming there, and their husband, he was, I think, the Cambodian ambassador to UK, and he'd gone back to try and sort things out or do something there. He never returned. He died over in Cambodia somewhere. And actually I remember just seeing that family, seeing how worried and concerned they were, and you knew they probably would never see their family again. But at that time, you see the Vietnamese people, I must admit, I'm very impressed with, when the amount of times we can forgive. Some of the things which some of the Vietnamese, which I know, have been through, and been forgiving enough to even US Marines who came into their country not really knowing what they were doing, shooting them up. Now is not the time for carrying on acts of revenge. That past is gone. Let it go. So sometimes there has to be, to secure peace in the future, to end conflict. When that war in Ukraine gets peaceful, never be resolving back to where you were before. But there comes a time when you forgive each other. And there's something also which is worth mentioning, that the people who have the superior forces, have the more money, have the greater number of people fighting, that's never as powerful as those who are really committed to whatever they're trying to defend. That commitment which you have is far greater. And just an example, how committed would those Russian soldiers be compared to the young man who in Ukraine who picks up a gun to defend his family? The commitment level is different. That's one of the reasons why that never fight anyone who's more committed than you. Little by little, I remember quoting that many, many years ago when the war which I was fighting, this is only a metaphor, we used to have these clay trucks coming past our monastery, Bodhinyana, in the very early days. I don't know how many of you remember that. But then I saw one of those clay trucks turn over on Kingsbury Drive. It was a B-double. And seeing that, I thought, oh goodness, that is dangerous. Because they lost control. And if that had lost control the bottom of the hill, it would have gone across the Southwest Highway. And I don't know, school bus, monastery monks or whatever, it would have killed them straight away. So I decided we should fight this. And I remember, why are you fighting? This is a big company. They have many more resources than you have. And I said, no, this is important to protect the people who come to Bodhinyana Monastery, to protect its peace and quiet and safety. Well, I knew that we would win. A lot of the time it was just two monks, Ajahn, Sujato, and myself in the office, trying to fight this case. And I say, because we are more committed. This is our monastery, this is our place. This is not just business. It's not just profit. It's something more important. And of course, we did win. The clay company just gave up after a while. We were just too difficult. They were the elephant, we were the mosquito. And the mosquito drives the elephant crazy after a while, it's not worth it. So that's one of the reasons why be very careful never to fight a war with someone who's more committed than you are. And by a war, I mean any conflict whatsoever. What that does, it gives you the hope that we can actually learn from, the conflicts of the past. And one of the great solutions, I must admit, and one of the wonderful solutions I've noticed in my life is the fact, I look at all the people here in this room today. You are from so many different lands, so many different cultures, so many different pasts. And you can all come and learn to live together in peace. Human beings can do this. Why can't governments? Aren't governments representatives of us, human beings? It's great that we have people who come from such different lands. They marry each other, they go to each other's countries to backpacking, they go to different people's places to study, they just live in each other's countries. So now, just what is an Australian? What is a Russian? What is a Vietnamese? We're all getting very mixed up. And I encourage that. I encourage even religions to get mixed up. There's a couple over in Singapore, and I often quote about them. I think he is a Buddhist, she is a Christian. They've got two sons, one is a Muslim, one is a Hindu. And I said, please, please, please have another kid and make them a Jew. So you can have the full set of 5. Of course, You can't make a person, but they were free to choose, and that's the religions they chose. And they're living in peace and harmony together. Why not? Even many years ago, I remember this lady came to one of the retreats which I was giving. Before we had our own retreat centre, this was over in North Perth in the Redemptorist Monastery Retreat Centre, and she came in a hijab. And I said, "No, you're a Muslim?" "Yeah, look at me, of course I am." She said, "I'm come on your retreat." "Okay, I won't tell." See, no, don't have to be serious like that. So she came into the retreat, took off the hijab, and because inside you didn't need to wear it according to the rules. And she said, "I can't see anything wrong with this. It was a wonderful retreat. Thank you very much." Isn't that how life should be? Where we actually accept, embrace one another, and we can't go to war with one another when we know each other. Because we can't sort of have these stupid territorial claims. Have you ever flown from Perth to, say, Europe somewhere? Sometimes, quite often, you fly over Ukraine. I've often looked out the window. I like window seats. And I haven't seen any lines. Sometimes you have different colours on maps. I haven't seen those lines in real life. They're where we add on. This is mine, this is yours. Why do we have that? Nice thing about our Buddhist society that everybody's welcome. We don't really have lines in the real world. Those are what people put on maps. This is mine, this is yours, keep out of mine. Although I must admit we do have property lines over in Serpentine, but we did put on our signs. Remember those signs we used to have over in, first of all it was in Bodhinyana Monastery, then we put it in Jhana Grove. It said, trespassers, it was no trespassing, because trespassers will be converted. And not prosecuted. Prosecuted was too forceful and too aggressive. But trespassers will be converted. That was far more scary than the trespassers will be shot. So maybe around Kiev you can put that and big signs around the city. Russians will be converted to being Ukrainians, or I don't know. But something with a bit of sense of humour, which everybody does have. And it's nice to see that sense of humour. And it also means it connects us. One of the reasons I like telling jokes is because everybody laughs. And when they laugh, we laugh together. When we laugh together, then we forget about our differences. Different ways of looking at things. Different ways of thinking we're right and you're wrong. Who is right? The ones who are peaceful, who are kind, who've got a wide mind, instead of always wanting to have it this way and no other way. The people who want to own. Sometimes you wonder, doesn't Russia have enough land? Why do they want to own the land in Ukraine? Makes no sense to me. Why we want to own things. The more you own, the more responsibility and problems you have. So little by little, we learn wisdom. And that wisdom, and up here we can't really control very much, but you do notice that lives change. The way of looking at things changes. We grow over those years. So that always leaves me with a lot of hope. You don't have to continue or go buying meat. Did I say this earlier? I don't think I did. I said it was just chatting beforehand about miso. Because when I first came to Australia 38 years ago, Ajahn Jakara was a senior monk, and he was really concerned there would be a nuclear war between Soviet Union and also Europe America will get involved because Garden Island had a sort of a big base or something. So, and he read that if you drink miso soup in the morning, that will protect you from radiation poisoning. So I had to eat miso soup every morning for months. And there was no nuclear fallout in Perth. Nevertheless, please be realistic. You don't need miso soup. There won't be any nuclear war or fallout. So instead, keep that positive mind. The same with COVID. Keep a positive. Maybe if you do get COVID, it's not the end of the world. So anyway, when I was over in, just last little story, when I was over in Melbourne, the last night I spent in the city temple of the Buddhist Society of Victoria, and then afterwards I flew out early the next morning back to Perth, and they did tell me one of the other monks in that temple, after I left, he got fever, and they found out he had the flu. Not COVID. Remember the ordinary type of flu we didn't worry about in the old days? He had that type of flu, so I was safe. So sometimes you really wonder why people get too afraid. It's the fear is one of the worst parts of any conflict. It's the fear is one of the worst parts of any pandemic. Please make sure you notice that and give up the fear. Be careful, be kind to yourself and others, but don't get afraid. Did I tell the ant joke last time I was here? You know why ants don't get COVID? Because they've got antibodies. Okay, enough of that. So thank you for listening. Now, are there any questions, either from the internet or from the floor? Question time. Yay. Anything from the internet? I thought I'd at least have a question from Mr. Putin. And he wasn't listening. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Is it working? Okay. I just need to speak louder. Thank you very much. I always have questions, but then I find you seem to answer them when you're talking, so it's quite impressive.
Okay.
Thank you. But I was wondering if you could speak to climate change, which I think is the other thing that's weighing me down in particular, along with the pandemic and Ukraine.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you for that. Again, the climate change is one of the positive things. I don't think there's anybody who denies it's happening anymore. Except really crazy people. But even like the conflict, sometimes it's the amount of stuff which is put into the atmosphere just when one bomb goes off. It's crazy at this particular time. But I also know that even though the climate change is here, it is a problem. There's so many ways, innovative ways of dealing with these things. It means that we have to focus much more. Like I remember just some of these communities in Bangladesh who were on one of the big estuaries of one of the rivers there. Every year their homes would get flooded, and somebody came along with a very innovative solution of just having floating homes. So the little huts, very simple built. When there would be a flood, actually homes went up with the flood, and then it went down again afterwards. When I saw some of the pictures of what was happening in New South Wales and Queensland, why on earth do we have to have a home in such an area which is tied, with big concrete slabs to the ground? Can't we have them so when the water comes up, they can float upwards? When the water goes down, they can just float down, just like a houseboat. And why is it so hard? And I have frustration like this with some of the council regulations. They get a small house, a tiny house. As monks, we live in tiny houses. It's really hard to get permission for them. The houses, little huts which we're building now at Bodhinyana Monastery, it took us 7 years to get permission for them, to actually build them. They're tiny little houses. But nevertheless, when we can sort of have a bit more understanding from places like councils and governments, more innovation. That's the other thing. Whenever there's a problem in the world, the innovators can come up with some great solutions. And if we can come up with those great solutions, and we find out after, look, there used to be this big problem. This is because I was brought up in London. I remember my English history. In the 17th century, they had all these houses in London were so close together, and they had this big fire in, what was it, 1666 or something, the Great Fire of London. And that destroyed so much houses that before people started building new houses, they put in this infrastructure of sewage. And so all the great sewer pipes in London at the time had the opportunity, 1 or 2 years, because of all that land was just basically cleared, we can put proper sewage in. And I don't know which genius had this idea, but they didn't have too much, no computers obviously, too much understanding about the technology of water flow and turbulence, but they looked at something as simple like the veins in a leaf, and how the smaller veins go into the bigger veins at a certain angle in a leaf, on a tree or in a bush in nature. And they use that to design the underground sewers in London. And they work for hundreds of years perfectly. So I know sometimes when there is difficulties, innovation comes, and we grow from this and become better. The thing is, we haven't really learned how to do is be better friends. That sort of disappoints me, because that also creates huge amounts of climate change. To make a tank, how much iron, how much explosives and stuff are needed to build something like that? How many ambulances could we build with the money for one tank? So little by little, we do have, hopefully, some learning happening. And some of the learning, and just too much power in too many hands, is very dangerous. Democracies are troublesome and very slow. It's very hard to get things agreed upon in a monastery when there's so many monks having an opinion. But it's much better than having a dictatorship where just one person makes all the decisions. Sometimes I wonder, because I'm a senior monk now, but there's so many monks over in Bodhi now. How many monks would we say there? About 23 or 24, yeah. Imagine having 24 monks who have to make a decision about something. Oh. If ever you go and see our dining room, the wall's colour is like a light yellow. But I decided, because I'd just taken over as being the boss there, let's have a democratic decision. So I had all this colour chart from the paint shop, all the different colours. We'll make it whoever has whichever colour has the most votes, that's what we will paint it. And this very intense yellow was chosen by the majority. The painter, he had a day of using it. He said, "Do you really want this?" It was more like a disco than a sort of a monastery dining room. And so, but I said, we have to do that because we have to learn about just how to make decisions together. Even if it was a wrong decision, and all the monks agreed, and it cost us a couple of thousand to get it all repainted. But nevertheless, we did. it was great because it was like a lesson that are more important how decisions are made than what the final decision is. Process rather than outcomes. And to me, that's always, people are more important than things. So hopefully, if any Ukrainians find any Russian who's starving or injured, please look after them. Be a really good Buddhist. Or be a good human being. Be kind. That kindness goes a long way. I've never been in a war, but I've certainly had moments of conflict. Here in Western Australia, what was that one time? In Bunbury, on the beach. I used to go there to meditate in the afternoons when I was teaching in the prison in the evening. And I was happily meditating there when... Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. When something whisked past my head. Then something else. And I saw it was some kids were throwing stones at me. And fortunately they weren't really good shots, but it was only a matter of time before one of those stones hit. And they yelled out, "Get off our beach, Rajneeshi." They thought I was a follower of Rajneesh. But anyway, a couple of more stones fell past me, so it's time to get up. So I remember just standing up and then turning around and then walk towards the kids. No way was I going to run away. I walked towards them. And of course, you know what happened. There's about 7 or 8 of them, only one of me. And I was quite thin in those days, so not so much of a target. But as I walked towards them, they all ran away except one of the guys. I remember just walking right up to him. I said, "Look, I'm not a Rajneeshi, I'm a Buddhist monk. But even if I was, it's not good to throw stones at anybody." And I said it was such a nice calmness. "Oh, we're sorry, sir." And the other kids came up, and I just gave them a little 5-minute, 10-minute talk about Buddhism and about what meditation was. "Oh, thank you, sorry what we did." That's how to deal with conflict. And why not? So little by little, kindness and a peaceful mind often prevails. Like, okay, bring that up. One of the other monks who came to visit from Vietnam years ago, I remember bringing him along, and he was teaching, he was a Theravada monk, he was teaching the Viet Cong, the communists, and the government. They could all come in, and they left him alone because he was a very good, kind, peaceful monk. He just gave a talk to everybody. And it was just so impressive that no one harmed him. Anyway, here we go. Smitha Tentin. How can we explain guilt in the context of karma, and how can we get rid of this habitual pattern of guilt in certain relationships? When you have guilt, you look at the past with remorse and you want to punish yourself. You think you're not good enough. Of course you're good enough. Good enough to be a better human being. So instead of looking at guilt as something which is a big rock we put on the back of our in our backpack on our back and carry it around with us for all of our lives, that doesn't allow you to get anywhere in life. It doesn't allow you to dance, to smile. So instead, any bad things which you think you've done, first of all, learn from them. It's the AFL code: acknowledge, forgive, learn. Learn, splash, let go. That's what karma is. It gives you the ingredients to grow from. From Singapore, I have this tension and fear that accompanies me always, like OCD, but I don't know to relax more, even though I just try to be aware. Don't try to be aware. Peace is a default state. When you don't do anything, you get so peaceful and still and blissful. That's why I keep on saying that meditation is the easiest thing in the world when you're not doing anything. You just sit there and just be in this moment. There's no other place to be. You're here now. Go into it. Make peace with it. Be kind, be gentle. And then stillness is there. Ajahn Chah used to say, you've heard me say this before, a leaf on a tree only moves because of the wind. The wind stops, the leaf stops. Your mind only moves because of wanting something and not wanting. When you don't want anything, you don't not want anything, when you're at peace, your mind becomes perfectly still all by itself. Oh, you mean I don't have to put effort in and try and strive to meditate? I do so much work anyway. If I had to strive when I meditated, oh, my meditation is my time off, my relaxation. Yay! And you enjoy it to the max. So tension and fear comes to me always like OCD. Okay, if the tension is there all the time, welcome the tension, welcome fear, thank you for visiting me, how are you? I'm not going to try and get rid of you anymore, I'm not going to be afraid of fear, I'm not going to get tense with tension, I'm going to allow it to be. Thank you. See what happens. When you don't feed tension, you don't feed anxiety, ooh, something bad's going to happen. It usually doesn't happen at all. Anyway, next question. Would appreciate suggestions for how to slow down in a moment when people around me seem so speedy. Would appreciate advice to how to slow myself down in the moment. Try acting like that. As you speak, and deliberately speak slowly. And if you're actually the person who's lecturing to other people, you do that and it actually slows you down. But imagine, there's only a few minutes left, I've got to be quick. Look, the last question, I'm sorry I can't answer all the questions this evening because it's very fun, I haven't got much time, please forgive me. So blah, blah. What does that do to your mind? Even if you may not understand what I'm saying, it just really makes you more tense. Or remember what Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh used to do when he was on his demonstrations in the United States, with Martin Luther King. And he would deliberately, when people were getting really anxious or angry, he would start, because he was in the front, he'd start walking very slowly. And because he was walking slowly, everybody else behind had to walk slowly. And that calmed everybody down. Simple things.